Following the international break, we're here to review England's performances across two fixtures against Belgium. In this video, we look at the stark contrast between Friday's 5-0 win and Tuesday's 3-2 loss, and we analyse why this may have happened. We also discuss why England fans shouldn't panic yet and what issues Wiegman has to solve before the Euros. This is our analysis of England's international break. Alright, let's get into it then. Today we're going to be discussing England's international break, in which they played Belgium twice with two very different results. Harry, let's talk about it because there was a stark contrast between the Friday night performance, the 5-0 victory at home to Belgium, and then last night's performance, Belgium 3, England 2. Where do you want to start? Should we start with Friday night?
Yeah, start with Friday night, and that was a brilliant England performance. I think it's fair to say England was superb from start to finish, and it showed that when England are on it, when it is their day, they can be a very, very good football side and one of the best, international sides in the world. And that is what we saw on Friday night. It was a brilliant performance. It was clinical in the final third. Potentially could have had a few more, but 5 goals was plenty enough. It was solid defensively. They really limited Belgium from having any chances at all. And it was an all-round really strong performance that I think, again, kept that momentum building. It showed consistency from the Spain win and into this international break, and things looked very, very rosy.
Yeah, we saw wide combinations from England with Bronze and Mead on one side, Charles and James on the other. Of course, Lauren Jones coming off at half-time, Frankie Beaver-Jones, and we pray to everything that is not a serious injury for Lauren James. But yeah, we saw some really effective wide combinations. We saw really efficient finishing in the box. It could have been even more. There was a few decent saves from Nicky Evrard that kept Belgium alive at times. So yeah, it was a really compounding performance, though, from England. As you say, a really real sign of what England are capable of. And I think after that, a lot of people would have been very positive about England and very positive about this international break. But I think after last night's performance, Belgium 3, England 2, that has changed a few things.
Yeah, take everything we just mentioned, the wide combinations, the set-piece threat, the efficient finishing, the solidity at the back, and just throw it all away, because that's exactly what England did in this second game. Just took everything good from the second game and from the first game and just got rid of it. And it is, again, it's a showing of when England are on... This international break was a showing when England are on their day, they are, unstoppable. But when they're off it, they are miles off it. Yeah. And that is exactly what we saw in this game. Across the board, not enough effort. No one was giving 110%. And it led to a really poor performance from start to finish. Belgium did very, very well. And they did play well. But England made it so easy for them. England could have played against any opposition last night, and it would have been a very, very difficult game. Because that was the level that the Lionesses were playing at. It was all over the place. You can't blame it on individuals. It's slightly frustrating watching people on social media and the sorts blaming it on one or two players. That's not the case. It's no one's fault. Like, as a team, it was not good enough. Simple as that. And I think that rather than finding people to blame or factors to put it down to, it's about just realising how bad it was and just forgetting about it and moving on.
Yeah, I'm not sure forgetting about it's the right approach. I think there is still stuff to be analysed from this game. I think overall, yes, you can say the performance level wasn't there, the effort levels weren't there, and probably because we've got an international break in April and nobody really wants to play in these games and risk getting injured, especially after seeing Russo and Lauren James go home early with injuries. I think that's going to have an impact. But I think there were some problems for this England team that needed addressing, namely how Belgium adapted from the first game to the second game, which caused England issues, because in the second game, Belgium moved from a 3-5-2 to a 3-4-3, and this gave them 3 players in the front line. Now, for England, because they play with a rest defence of a 2-1, with Brighton, Williamson at the back, and then Walsh sitting slightly higher, and the fullbacks pinning the opposition back by being really high. The problem with that is when you match up against the 3-back, even once those full-backs drop, they're marking the wing-backs. So there's always going to be 3 players in there. And we saw that. They were dragged out so easily, the England defenders. I mean, you look at the first goal, there was so much space there for a really poor organisation of the back line there. I think when we think back to the Spain game in February, one of the biggest praises we could have given to England was how well that back line stayed in touch, and they moved up and down effectively. And that they held their line well, and that caught Spain players offside and made it very difficult for Spain to penetrate England. In this game, night and day difference. England were all out of whack in terms of that line. All out of shape, and it was really poor, and that's what led to the first goal, because Tessa Williat was able to get the run on Bright because Charles was rolling her on side. Huge disorganisation, huge miscommunication. Williat is going to take an opportunity like that. Williat's second goal comes on the left hand side, and it was Belgium's third goal, I believe. And Bronze is dragged miles out of position, and everyone's like, "Well, where's Lucy Bronze?" But this was a tactical problem, because there was an overload from Belgium. So she was stuck between two players. Do you go and mark the winger? Do you go and mark the wing back? She opted to mark the winger. Wing back's in absolute acres. Now suddenly Williamson has to drag herself out of position, but she doesn't go and close that down, because she also needs to cover. She also needs to mark the space. Bright's not dealing with Williat in the box. There's players arriving on the edge that they're worried about as well, and it's all just a defensive mess. Ball goes into the box. Williat scores again. It's a really worrying sign, I think, for England, and I don't want to play it up too much, because I think there are easy fixes, and Wiegman and the England staff will be looking at this game, analysing the game, and looking at where it went wrong. But I think when we consider that most of this result you can just wipe away and say, look, England weren't interested in this game, they didn't have the work ethic, and as much as you may want to lament that, I'd lament more the fact that there's an international break in April during the run-in. That, for me, doesn't make any sense. I think the one thing you can take away, and the one thing you can look to analyse, is where it all went wrong defensively for England, because that can be applied in other contexts as well. And I think if we play like that, if we're that open at the back in more important games, then the same consequences will happen. So I think England need to be aware of that. In terms of attacking areas, it was stale, it was stagnant, but still somewhat effective at times. I mean, Mead got into a pocket and got brought down. She did well to win the penalty and then put it away nicely. And Michelle Aguiman took a half chance and volleyed it top corner. But I think there was some issues with chance creation. Again, I just think England didn't look interested in this game.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the ball moved too slowly. There were so many times where they could have played a riskier pass. Instead, it's play it to someone who's closest to that player you want to pass to, and that just gave time for Belgium to get into shape. So I think England here, it was lethargic, I think, is the best way to describe this performance. And when you go from Friday, which was energised, which was, we watched exciting football from England, to this game where it's slow, it's lethargic, they're disinterested, it's night and day difference. And again, it's different from Belgium, because in the first game, defensively weak, offered very little in terms of attacking threat. In this game, really good box defending, really strong holding of the lines, really good mid-block, and then they actually had an outlet, so they attacked with some speed. So, yeah, I think it's one of those where you don't want to read too much into it, as I say, because I don't think England were interested in this game. But there are tactical issues which I think should be of concern to Wiegman.
Yeah, it was naive of England to expect to turn up this game and not expect Belgium to change anything. England thought they'd rock up last night, just field a similar 11 and turn up and roll Belgium over again. And that was costly, because they underestimated Belgium. They thought after the first performance they didn't have it in them, and credit to them, because as you say, that Tessa Williat coming back in as an outlet massively helped. A little bit of a system change, and overall the individuals played much, much better. They made the right changes. They took Iliana out of the back line, they took Masipa out of the midfield. They did well to rotate the 11, and they rotated it so it was more fresh. They changed the system, and they found an outlet, and that massively helped them. I've seen a lot of people, the other thing, criticising them for celebrating like they've won the World Cup final, and yes, I do think it was a little bit over the top.
You did that.
I did, but you put it in the circumstances. If you've just lost 5-0 to a side, and a couple of days later you manage to turn them over in your own backyard, that's a massive result for them. And it may mean that they stay in the top division of the Nations League. We'll have to wait and see. But credit to Belgium. They did very, very well. For England, it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. And again, as you say, you don't read too much into it, but on a night where Netherlands won, on a night where Spain won 7-1, or however many goals they scored in the end, England are in Belgium getting battered. And that's the problem, is that, yes, it was just an off performance, and across the board it was lazy and there was no effort. But if that ever happens in an international tournament or in a big game, then England will get absolutely trounced. And as I say, that probably won't happen, because if England rock up to the Euros and only give it 70% effort, then what's the point in going? But it's the statement that comes from it, is that again, it brings out that questions when you put on the England shirt. The only fact that you should be thinking about is I'm representing my national team. I'm going to go out there and deliver, rather than I might get injured or I might get too tired to play in the FA Cup semi-final this weekend, so I'm not really going to bother. And in that case, why have we got an international break, and why hasn't Serena rotated the side? Esme Morgan got a half. That's better. Jess Carter got a half. But why are you playing? That's the reason why Brighton Charles came off at half time, because they were more focused on the FA Cup semi-final this weekend, and fair enough to them. But as a manager, you've got to realise that you had players on the pitch who were more concerned about the end of the domestic season than risking it all for this game. So realise that as a manager, and start the players you put on the bench. Fran Kirby, Brighton haven't got a semi-final this week, so play her in there as well. It was really bizarre. She got half an hour, but should be in there from the off, because again,
on the wing as well, where Kirby isn't a winger anymore.
No, it was it was just bizarre across the board. Again, that's the other thing. Belgium were fresher. They rotated the 11. They brought players in. England, they rotated the attack, but that was through necessity. So I think there was problems across the board, from personnel, from tactically, from Serena herself. It was just a horrible evening from an England point of view.
Yeah, I want to get to what we can conclude from this game, how we can ascertain from both teams. But first, I do want to touch on that the situation regarding having an international break here, because we spoke about it a bit on stream last night about how we play pointless friendlies in October and November, and I stand by that point. I think those should have been Nations League games. You play Nations League October, November. You play the last round in February, March, and then you go and play the finals once the Euros is over, especially in a Euros year. And I think UEFA at the moment, they're looking at adding more games. The Champions League next season is expanding. They're bringing in a Europa League as well. The part of the consideration with that has to be, how do we bring down the schedule in other areas? And I think removing an international period would be really important.
Yeah.
But the problem then becomes, that's got to be a FIFA thing. So it's difficult, but I think that's what they've got to start considering, and FIFA and UEFA have got to talk in that regard, because, well, to be fair, other internationals have just been playing friendlies this weekend.
Yeah.
UEFA have put on the Nations League. I think it needs to be a global discussion. FIFA should be there, UEFA should be there, various, all the other continental bodies need to be there. Discuss this schedule, especially, FIFA bringing in a Women's Club World Cup. That's coming up in a few years' time. You've got the expansion of the World Cup that we expect over the next 5-10 years, the expansion of the Euros we expect to come by the 2029 edition. There's a lot happening. The expansion of the Champions League is happening next season. The Europa League's coming in next season. There's so many more games being added to the schedule. It needs to be reworked. It needs to be looked at where we can bring something out. And I think having an April international break, especially for the English clubs, to have the FA Cup semi-finals this weekend, and then the Champions League semi-finals in the 2 weekends after. In the case of Chelsea, obviously Arsenal have Champions League, City, United both, and Liverpool both have those FA Cup games. It's very taxing then, the schedule for these clubs and for those players who this last 6-7 games in some cases, or 4 for some of the smaller sides, that period's really, really important. We've seen a number of injuries in this international break where if you just had a week off, or you could spread out some of the other games, it takes the load. It lessens the load on these players. And I think that would be really important. But we've seen, just for Netherlands last night, Viviane Miedema, Vika captain, coming off injured for England in this international break. Alessia Russo, that one seemed more precautionary. But Lauren James, obviously, with a hamstring injury, hopefully nothing too serious. But they're all players who would be really important for City, Arsenal and Chelsea, who may be out now. For an extended period of time, because they're playing in internationals. And for Chelsea especially, when you consider how much they've played over the last month and how much they're going to play over the next month, to have 6 players starting for England and 7 when you consider Beaver Jones came on in the Friday game as well, across these games, that's really difficult for Chelsea to manage. And so, yeah, I think there's got to be consideration over the international breaks and where they're placed. And I don't think we need to play random friendlies in October and November that then mean the schedule is bunched up. And when we get to June time, no one's going to be trying in those games because the Euros is a month away. So the managers won't want to give anything away because, Spain are playing Portugal and Belgium, 2 teams they have in their group. We'll watch them play them in June and we'll watch them play them again a month later. Yeah. It ruins the Euros in a sense, that. And I think that's a real shame as well. But that's going to be some pointless games at the start of June. England are going to have to play Spain, which again, that
Yeah.
may well happen at the Euros if it goes as we'd expect. Those two sides will meet in the semi-final stage. Now, that for me, again, if we've watched it a month earlier, it ruins it to a degree. I think there's got to be some reconsideration over the scheduling, and I think that is something that needs to be addressed, especially with the expansion of various competitions over the next few years. Let's talk though about the conclusions we can draw from this game. For Belgium, a big win, very important win. Do you think they can stay in League A now?
I think so. They've got a very, very good chance. They've already proven that they can take the game to Spain, and and again, similar, sentiment with Portugal. They've shown that they can put up a good fight, and if they can get a result in one of those games, and they've got every chance of staying in. And I think they've put themselves in a very, very good position. They've proven so far in this Nations League they can challenge against the best sides. They should have beaten Spain. How on earth they lost that game, I will never know. They pushed Portugal all the way. That was very close and could have gone either way. And yes, they got dismantled by England on Friday, but they've bounced back and responded really well. And I think that they've shown clearly that they are a good side. They do have some quality players in this 11. And as they look to build, hopefully they'll look to stay into the Nations League in the next international break. And as they get into the Euros, they'll be hoping they can try and make a go of it and try and show that they are developing, that they are growing. They're a side that haven't really made any dents in the women's game so far. So this will be a really, really good opportunity for Belgium going into this European Championships. Take momentum from wins like this against England and go on and use it. And again, play your quality players, get that system right, and on their day when they are defensively solid and they're clinical in the front areas, then they can be a real force and they can cause a lot of problems. But that's now they've scored 2 goals against Spain. They've scored 3 goals against England. They are putting quite a few goals past some of the best defences on the international stage, and that's very, very positive for Belgium. And hopefully, as I said, we'll see them at the Euros pulling off some big results.
Well, exactly. That's what I was going to pose next to the question. If we look on the horizon, the Euros coming up. They're in a group with Spain, Portugal, and Italy. It's probably the most difficult group, bar the England group. Is there any chance that they could qualify from second place?
I think so. I think that it could definitely be close between them and them and Portugal, and obviously Italy will be in that conversation as well. Spain will expect it to be the outright winners of that group and probably win it by a canter. But again, we've seen some really poor performances from Spain, so it may not be as easy as that. But I do think that it definitely won't be one of those group stages where they rock up and they get no points. I think that they will challenge. I think they will make a real good go of it, and it's the tighter group where I look at it and they could end up going, it'll be decided by a couple of points or goal difference or head-to-heads. It's that close. But they've proven over the last few months for me that they can challenge the likes of Portugal and Italy in that group and potentially get something off Spain.
Yeah, definitely so. Moving on to England then. Obviously, you don't want to jump to any unnecessary conclusions, but what we can conclude is England's second in the group now. Do you think it's very difficult to see England now getting into those Nations League finals?
Yeah, I think so. It relies on beating Spain again, which
and then beating Portugal, which haven't done yet.
Yeah, exactly. They're both doable things, but they're very, very difficult. I think it's disappointing because it's kind of one of those where England did the hard part. They beat Spain at Wembley. That was a brilliant result. And then when they've just got to do the simple bit, or what should be the simple bit, they've gone and thrown it all away. And that will be very disappointing. But yeah, England, I'd be surprised if they do now get through to that to the Nations League semi-finals, which is a shame. But at the end of the day, if they throw away this tournament, but it means England going to Euros more fresh and don't worry about those junior internationals, and from an England point of view, you'd take that. So it's a shame that I don't think England will now get to the semi-finals. I think it's key to it's one of those where you have to be balanced throughout this result. Yes, you have to focus on some things, and there were aspects that do need to be looked at, but at the end of the day, there's no need for an overreaction. There's no need to bin off Hannah Hampton because Mary Oates would have saved all of them, as some people seem to believe. But yeah, England just need to. I think again, it's one of those where you respond in the next internationals, but England won't want to do that because they won't be trying in the June games.
It'll be interesting because I think there'll be a desire to get to the Olympics because the Olympics is people aren't really bothered about winning the Nations League, but the Olympics does hold prestige, and I wouldn't be surprised if the 2028 edition in LA is the last Olympics that has senior women's teams in.
Yeah.
Because I think if we're looking at the schedule in a whole, what is one competition that could go that doesn't hold as much weight anymore? I think it'd probably be the Olympics, especially with the Club World Cup coming in. I think it'd be very difficult then to schedule in that. You'd have an international tournament every year, possibly.
It's ridiculous.
And then suddenly there's no space in the schedule. So I think the Olympics is one that could go and become an under-23s tournament as it has in the men's game. So I think there will be a bit of heightened importance on that 2028 edition because of the fact it could be the last one that has the senior teams in it. And I think it's in LA. It's all built up for the US to win one last one, isn't it? But I think it'll be interesting for England. It would be nice to be there again, though. I'm not that worried about the Nations League. I'm not massively worried about the Olympics. It's a nice competition to be at, but it doesn't hold the same weight as the World Cup or the Euros, which is where the focus will be for England. So, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in that Spain game. But I think it's very difficult now to see England getting a result away from home and then obviously progressing through to the semi-finals. So, yeah, we'll have to see. Again, looking further ahead though, England did have the best defensive record in this competition before the Belgium game. That's now out of the window. But to be fair, they've still got the second least. Only France have conceded less, and France are the only team so far that have qualified already for the finals.
Well done, France.
Which is ridiculous. Norway, Iceland and Switzerland have picked up less points combined than France have in their Nations League group, so that's not great for them. But yeah, I think England have looked really good defensively. This, though, was a very different result. But again, that does open up the questions, was this simply just a one-off occasion? Hopefully so.
Yeah, hopefully so. But yeah, as you say, at the end of the day, the Nations League isn't up there on the importance. And again, it brings back to that question that, adding all these tournaments and extending all these tournaments, great. It's great to see the growth of the women's game. It's great to see that all these, these tournaments are expanding and developing. But if that is going to be at the detriment to the bigger competitions, if that's going to drop the standard and affect the major competitions, then do we really want to see all these tournaments or not? So, because as you say, this Nations League, the way the fixtures have panned out, it's impacted the quality of the Euros already, and that's a massive shame. And if that's going to keep happening, then that's a situation that needs to be addressed. It's a situation, for example, with this April international break, that has been UEFA have dealt with and solved in the men's game. So why on earth have they not solved it in the women's game? Just use your brain and just think, right, if it doesn't work for these football teams, why are we doing it for the other football teams? So you've taken out the men's game because they realised that the fatigue was a problem. So why on earth they've kept it in the women's game, I have no idea. Yeah. Someone at UEFA needs to have a bit of a light bulb moment and go, hang on a minute, why are we doing this? Because this was a problem. Hopefully it should get sorted, and I think it will be an issue that is addressed sometime, hopefully soon, hopefully for next year. If we rock up to an April 2026 international break, that is going to be very, very disappointing. So may get a petition going, bin off next year's the April international break.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the next few years with the women's game because of the new competitions coming in. So yeah, lots of scheduling needs to be sorted out, lots of decisions need to be made by the higher ups. I think that, though, does summarise everything we want to talk about over this international break. One where England probably weren't the most... probably were incredible Friday night, weren't brilliant Tuesday night. And from that, we learned nothing.
No.
Great stuff.
We're the losers.
There we go. That's who lost. Us. We'll be back this weekend. FA Cup semi-finals are coming. Very exciting stuff. We'll be back on Friday to preview them, so look out for that coming this Friday. And then, of course, Chelsea-Liverpool on Saturday and Man City-Man United on Sunday. So lots to look forward to this weekend. And then, of course, we're back into the full swing of domestic action as we return with WSL action and, of course, Champions League action. Very exciting semi-finals coming up over the next few weeks. So look out for all of that. Of course, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new and want to watch more of our content. And if you want to check out another video, there'll be one on screen now, which you can go ahead, give a click and go and watch. That, though, is everything from us today. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.